Hannah, welcome. What school are you from?
I'm from Stockbridge.
Okay, right on. And publication? What publication are you involved with?
Uncaged.
And is that the yearbook or is that newspaper?
It's the newspaper.
Okay. All right. I'm just promoting a couple other people to panelists so they can join the conversation as well. Logan. Oh, where is Logan? There is Logan. I got to unmute Logan. Logan, welcome. Are you there?
Yep, right here.
Excellent. We don't see you, Logan, but we can hear you, and that's just cool. So welcome, Logan. What school are you from?
I'm from Stockbridge also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
we got our Stockbridge team here. Excellent. So how are things going for you guys? Have you ever encountered a First Amendment issue at Stockbridge?
Not at the top of my knowledge. Maybe perhaps have. I haven't had a problem with it personally.
Okay. That's good. That's not every school can say that, so that's good news, actually. All right. And what's good? What's happening with your publication? Any news in the news world?
We just had our first edition come out.
Excellent.
Pretty great. And working on the second.
Good deal. So when you print, how many do you print?
Ooh. E, do you want to help me out?
650.
650?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Cool. And it's well received?
I feel so.
All right. Cool. All right. Another attendee's joining in. It's Samantha and Abby. And they are going to be chiming in just a second as soon as I... there you go. Samantha and Abby, welcome. Where are you guys from?
Holt. Yeah, right near Lansing.
Okay. Well, welcome. How's your year going?
It's going good. Yeah.
Busy, but good.
Yeah. How many issues are you yearbook or your newspaper?
We're newspaper.
Okay. How many issues you guys get out?
2 so far.
2 so far? See, I'm jealous. Our first one tanked at Fraser.
Oh.
There were too many things that needed to be fixed, so we put it on the shelf. We're like, we're not going to spend it. It's so expensive to print. So we kind of shelved it and improved it, and it's coming out shortly. So congratulations to you guys for doing 2. That's pretty amazing.
And we've been starting up. We used to only have print issues, but we've been starting to do web stories now, and so we've been working out a lot on those.
All right. So how often do you put stuff on your web?
Our goal was every day.
Yeah, but sometimes it's about, I don't know, even right now, maybe like 2 a week.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's that. Especially now, like we just had a deadline. Like we're going to be distributing our print tomorrow. So we with deadline, a lot of people got behind on their web stories. So, and that's actually one of the things we wanted to talk about.
Okay. Well, we have a couple more people joining us. Oops, we lost one. All right. But Ellie, I think, is going to join us. Can we talk about vertical video for a second, lady? All right. So yeah, I just moved Ellie into the conversation, and I gotta unmute her. There she is. Ellie, hi.
Hi.
Ellie, where are you from?
I'm from Fenton.
From
Hey,
Fenton.
I went to Fenton.
Oh, did you?
Go?
Yep, I have Pam.
Perfect. Great. You're in good hands.
Yes, definitely.
I just want to point out that there's actually 2 names that say Nancy Costello on the screen.
Yes.
I'm Nancy Costello. The other person is Caitlin McBride. My name is under Caitlin's name or under Caitlin's picture. And Caitlin is the teaching assistant for the First Amendment clinic at Michigan State University. So Caitlin, wave so we know who you are, even though your name is not correct. Good, thank you.
I'm not Nancy. I'm the other Nancy. That's not Nancy.
Yeah, there you are. So yeah, yeah, everybody in the panel. Sorry, I just something happening in my room over here. Sorry. All right. So, yes. So, Caitlin and Nancy are part of the First Amendment Law Clinic up at Michigan State University, and part of their mission is to help young journalists with any First Amendment right issues. Does anybody have anything that's come up or they dealt with that they have questions about? You know, can you do? Should you do? What people are trying to do to you?
Did they have an issue with the vaping story? Like if they should leave them anonymous or not?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you say that louder?
Oh, so basically, someone on our staff was writing about vaping or like e-cigarettes. And while they were interviewing people, they didn't know, since they are under 18, they didn't know if they should leave their names like as their names or put them as anonymous.
We ended up putting them as anonymous.
Yeah.
I think that's probably wise, given that, it could be incumbent upon a principal, if they discover that someone is doing something illegal, that they might have to report.
Well,
right?
and then there were people who were over 18, who we interviewed as well. And I didn't do the story, but the person, they didn't ask them if they wanted to be named or not. So that's another reason why we just decided to keep it anonymous.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think that's wise, especially though if students are underage, right? There's a lot of different like privacy issues connected with that. And then of course, whenever anybody gives you an interview, even if they're of majority age, right, over 18, it's assumed when people speak to you, if you have fully identified yourself, right, that they're then on the record and that you can use their name. Sometimes this is more not legal as much as sort of journalism ethics, right? For those of you who don't know, I was a newspaper reporter for 15 years before I went into law and became a First Amendment expert. So when I was a journalist working for the Free Press and the Associated Press, if I was working with a source, interviewing a source that was, relatively uneducated about something like this, if all of a sudden they spoke to me and said, oh, geez, maybe what I should have said to you should be off the record, right? I would really sort of evaluate what they told me, who they were, and sometimes I would say, okay, we'll put this as off the record because you have no idea how to work with the press, If you were interviewing, though, like an elected official, a city councilman, a mayor, something like that, they know better. So when they say something, it's on the record. And there's no real backtracking on that, right? They have to say to you first, what I'm about to say to you is on deep background or it's off the record. And then as a journalist, I think that for credibility reasons, you should respect that, okay? So in your situation, if this person who was just over the age of 18 and they're talking about vaping and then they went and said, oh, now I don't really want to be on the record for this, it is kind of a judgment call on your part. But legally, what they're saying, they can't get in trouble for, right? Because of the age.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I really like that answer.
Yeah.
So what happens, my question is, here's the self-advisor kicking in. The principal comes in and says, well, you guys know who it is. You have to tell me.
Oh, yeah.
Or if the principal said, and that's where you got to be careful, I guess. What would you advise the reporters about telling their advisors in that situation? Because if the principal comes up and tells me, does not the advisor need to report that, or how's that work?
So this gets into confidentiality of sources. And Caitlin, I'm going to turf this to you because the Student Press Law Center, where she was an intern for last summer in Washington, D.C., has worked with this a little bit more closely. Do you have any opinions on this?
Yeah, so this is actually an issue we've been working kind of closely with, and I've been doing a couple of projects on it and research. So professional journalists have protection against disclosing their sources. There's laws in place in a lot of states that protect them from having to disclose their sources and being threatened with jail time or any kind of number of threats. But the tricky thing is we don't know how these laws apply to student journalists because it's never been really tackled before. There's never been courts that have made these decisions. It's not really in the law. So we're kind of, at this point, just sort of guessing based on what professional journalists have access to. So the theory, at least, is that journalists, high school student journalists and college student journalists should have protection against disclosing their sources. So they should be able to keep that information confidential because that's kind of journalistic integrity. If sources can't trust journalists to keep their information confidential, they're not going to talk to them. And then that kind of undermines the whole system of journalism that we have. So in theory, students would be able to claim these kind of protections against disclosure. Now, advisors might be a little bit different because they're employees of the school, so they might have a contractual obligation that if they know confidential information, they might have to disclose it. So one thing that we often suggest to student journalists is if you have confidential information, you don't have to share the sources with your advisor, because if the advisor doesn't know, they can just say they don't know, and then they won't be on the hook for it.
Can I add one thing to this?
Yeah.
In a professional organization, there are some exceptions where they're supposed to divulge. And if it's a criminal investigation, I believe if it's involved a grand jury indictment situation, or also if there is if it's sort of an emergency threat to someone's, if someone could possibly be killed in a situation if they didn't divulge, okay? But the key to this is that if law enforcement or the authorities have a way to discover the information without having to pry it out of the journalist, they have to go to that source first, okay? So in other words, we'll give you an example. Let's say a bunch of students were at a party and a shooting occurred and a young person was wounded or, God forbid, even killed, okay? As a journalist, you went into the situation, you interviewed people. They said, I'll give you information off the record, so you use these quotes from people anonymously. And then if law enforcement steps in and they say, we want to know who said this quote, okay? Is it possible that they just don't want to do any more work themselves? There's all these other witnesses to this particular shooting. They could go interview those people too, right? But they're being kind of lazy about it because they're going to the journalist to say, I want your information, okay? But they have capability to do their own interviews and to try to dig up information. In that situation, possibly, a journalist could keep their sources confidential because law enforcement have other avenues to find out the same information. There are some exceptions to this. And again, as Caitlin said, we don't know if this particular process of keeping your sources confidential actually applies to the student press. But it's the thing that we would go forward with if there would be some type of a court action. The problem is it's no guarantee that it's going to be enforced for a student journalist as it would be for a professional journalist. We don't know that because it hasn't been tested in the courts.
And if you guys want more information on this, this is often called reporter's privilege. Those are the name of the laws. The Student Press Law Center has a whole section under their legal guides, legal topics, under protecting sources and information. They have a bunch of documents that could kind of help flesh this out a little bit more. I know we're going to upload some stuff to the McClellan about this topic too that we're working on. But just in the meantime, that's some more resources for you guys for questions on this.
And what's the website address for that, Caitlin?
SPLC.org.
It is a great resource. We had someone else join us. Madeline joined us. And Madeline, I just unmuted you. Madeline, what school are you from?
I'm from Utica.
Okay. And what type of publication?
I'm the editor-in-chief of the print newspaper.
Excellent. Well, welcome. Have you guys, Utica, right? That you guys had the big bus story back in the day, correct?
Yeah, we just had that in our last issue, our November issue. Yeah.
Oh, what did you do a follow-up to that story or something?
We haven't done a follow-up yet because the buses have kind of settled down, but my advisor said that she's noticed news people in parking lots for buses now, so but not like really any like big action has happened yet.
Oh, I think we're talking about two different stories. I'm referring to a story from a handful of years ago where,
Oh,
was that your Utica? Was that you? Your school?
I'm not exactly sure. My advisors never mentioned another bus shortage story. We just noticed it this year, so we started writing about it.
All right. Yeah, no, there was buses were linked to a gentleman and cancer. I thought it was out in that direction. I thought it was Utica.
It was Utica.
So there's a few high schools out in that area. So it may not have been your school specifically.
Oh.
So what was your story about the bus? What was the crux of that?
Our buses, like we had bus drivers, we have a bus driver shortage like right now. So
Okay.
it was about how there like aren't enough buses to either pick up students, and then students weren't making it to their games because the bus drivers were taking them to the wrong location or just weren't showing up at all. So we were just kind of like uncovering that, but we weren't really allowed to like interview teachers and all that stuff. Like we had to strictly interview students.
Oh, okay. So did
Yeah.
the district not let you talk to bus drivers? Was that it?
We didn't interview any bus drivers because we wanted to like see what from the students' perspectives.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean we have a quote from the principal, but we didn't get to really interview any teachers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. So how's your publication going? You get a few issues out?
Yeah, we just received our December issue in the mail today.
Excellent. Well, congratulations
Thank you.
on that. So Nancy, can you tell us a little bit more about the First Amendment Law Clinic? Because I had the privilege of having a couple of your grad students come through and do the presentations at Fraser. It was over a series of, I think it was like 5 or 6 weeks. They came in a handful of times, which was pretty neat. So what is the First Amendment Law Clinic and what does it do for schools?
Okay, so one of the main things that we do is we offer these First Amendment workshops where I train law students at the MSU College of Law in First Amendment law and other various sort of attendant areas of law, and then they create workshops that they bring into the high schools, and we teach journalism students, yearbook students, broadcast students these workshops, and the workshops cover about 8 different topics. Well, we do 8 workshops and they cover about 5 different topics. We cover student speech, we cover student press law, we also cover copyright, trademark, Freedom of Information Act. We also cover libel law and privacy law, and social media law, which of course is huge, right? All of these things affect social media, whether you're on Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat or what have you. And those workshops they'll cover 8 days in a given semester. I think students have really loved it. They've had a lot of great questions. You might learn things in your journalism classes about Tinker and Fraser and some of those really, really big student press cases and student speech cases, but you might not be learning as much about copyright and libel and privacy, particularly privacy and copyright. And students are getting into a heap of trouble with that right now, especially around social media. And you have a chance to really learn about it and how to use these different mediums, but use them and also protect yourself from getting into trouble with it and using them really effectively, right? The other thing is we take questions from student journalists, all kinds of questions. There was an interesting one recently, about a year ago, where a young woman at one of the Michigan high schools who's Muslim was running track or cross country, I think it was, and she was told that she had to take off her hijab because she was running and that she was competing. And she objected to this and said, couldn't there be some type of accommodations for this? And she came to us to see if, in fact, this was a violation of the First Amendment, but more the Establishment Clause, which is Freedom of Religion Clause. So we did a lot of research on this and found that no, she could, in fact, wear her hijab, but it had to be perhaps of a certain length and a certain cut so it wouldn't interfere with her running or with any of the other competitors that she was competing against. So that was like an unusual question, but we get all sorts of questions, especially copyright questions from students that we'll work on over the semester or that we'll have some fast answers for depending on how involved the question is. The second thing I wanted to point out to you guys, the students, is that we're mounting something brand new. It's called the McClellan Free Speech Online Library. And it's online right now at McClellanLib, LIB.com. But we're doing sort of a big press launch of it in early February. And it functions the same way the clinic does, where we're going to have, we have questions and answers on there. You can read over a question, sort of a typically asked question by student journalists, and we'll give you short answers and longer answers, and also a chance for you to send us questions via email or post them right on the site, and then we promise to get back to you within a certain number of days with some type of a response, depending on how deep the research has to go. So we're hoping that, and this is a nationwide website, but we're hoping a lot of Michigan student journalists take advantage of it.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any other First Amendment kind of questions or legal questions? I think I got a couple people muted, but so here's the thing about the social media and just grabbing stuff and putting it up on social media. That I work at a radio station as well, and you can't just grab stuff off the internet and use it in your publication. You can't just grab it and throw it up on your social media feeds, like on your Facebook or your Twitter or an Instagram. You can do that on your personal one, and you probably won't get in trouble. But if you did it on the one that's branded as your brand, as your paper, or as your school, they go after deep pockets, and schools have deep pockets, and radio stations have deep pockets. So it's like as a DJ, you're like trying to be interesting on social media, and you're like reposting, whatever, Cardi B and whatever ridiculous thing she did today, and reposting those pictures. Radio stations have been getting in trouble for just grabbing those images and using them. So the email went out from corporate saying no more, you got to really be careful, or be careful to, you can't just grab it and post it as your own. You can retweet things or repost things, but you can't just grab it and use the image, because DJs were doing that a lot. People in radio and TV, and then it's getting in trouble. People are going after them for the copyright. So careful when you're doing things for your social media. You can retweet things and repost things, but you can't take that image and make a new post with it, because that's where you start running into trouble. So be careful with that. And you can do that on your personal one, and they probably won't come after you. But when you do it on, the Ecuador's one, you're gonna get in trouble. So careful with that.
I actually have a comment on that too. Well, actually, kind of a rhetorical question. So, do you guys think, is it enough if you grab like a photo from somewhere and you put it in your yearbook or your newspaper? Is it enough if you just put a credit, like where you got it from? Do you think that's enough to overcome copyright? To the students out there? Some of them are muted. I don't know if they can hear me.
Yeah. Anybody brave and want to answer?
We get this question a lot, actually.
Yeah,
it's a good
that's
question.
why I bring it up.
Okay, but
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so it's actually a really common misconception. So another thing we've heard a lot is, like, have you ever heard you can use 30 seconds of a song and that's fine as long as you use less than 30 seconds? That's not true either. So the same thing with, like, it's not enough just to put a credit with your photo. That's not enough to get over copyright. People can still come after you guys for that. You have to actually have permission from the person who created the photo or the song or the video or whatever it is you're borrowing from to get over copyright protections.
Now, here's a question about yearbooks, because I got a little question about yearbooks that since it's not, yearbooks are sold individually to a close. Yearbooks aren't necessarily sold to the community generally, and so since it's a closed market, that copyright doesn't apply, and you can use images in a yearbook. That's something that I had heard before. Have you heard that? Is that an argument? Is that legal? Like if you want to do year in review, right, and they want to do their own year in review, and they're pulling images from the web about all the things from the year, I heard that was okay in a yearbook.
So there's this thing in copyright law called fair use. So this is kind of the couple of circumstances where it is okay to use other people's work, because we want to encourage artistic creativity. We want to encourage people to use stuff. And I actually got a question in the chat that was, what about sounds like podcast, or what if you were doing a review of a movie? So Congress built into the law that you can use other people's work for comment, criticism, educational use, scholarly research, things like that. So, like if I'm doing a review of a movie, I have to be able to show parts of the movie to give context of what I'm reviewing. Same thing with kind of yearbook. If you're using it for an educational purpose or kind of a documentary purpose of the year, then that probably falls under fair use and it would be okay and it wouldn't violate copyright.
One of the reasons for that too is that there is, as Jamie mentioned, a very limited distribution of the yearbook. So if the yearbook was being sold far and wide and you're having, thousands of people buy it, that might be a different story, because then it would have an economic impact on the market for the original picture. So whoever took the original picture should be able to sell it to a yearbook that has such wide distribution, okay? But because it's very narrow, it's really just within a school community, parents and students, the economic impact is not so great. And there's also an educational mission behind it. Students take classes, they take yearbook classes, they get grades for this and so forth. And so you're going to have probably an educational fair use exception that will apply there and protect the yearbook. I will say, though, let's change that around and say that you're a student broadcaster, and say the student broadcaster wants to borrow a picture or some music as background for whatever broadcast they're giving. Okay, it's one thing if that broadcast is within the school. Again, there might be an educational fair use exception here because students are getting graded for this. It's a broadcast class. The distribution of it is very, very limited within the school. But a lot of broadcasters, student broadcasters, are now interested in putting their broadcasts up on YouTube. That's a problem, because then the distribution of the music that you're playing as the backdrop to your broadcast is now being distributed far and wide to anybody who taps into that YouTube presentation. That would not necessarily be protected by educational fair use at all. And I would really suggest you don't post that kind of stuff to YouTube.
Now, there are ways around this, of course, because fair use is a defense. So the thing about copyright is usually, kind of like you said, Jamie, that they're not going to go after individual students for the most part. You guys aren't going to have, the deep pockets that they're looking for to sue about. So fair use is a defense, but you could still be in trouble for copyright before you can bring up the defense. If you're worried about this, what you can always do is look for sound clips, music, photos, and things that are in the public domain, and you don't have to worry about copyright at all. So if you go to a website like Pixabay, those are all images that are free of copyright in the public domain, free for you guys to use and edit, to practice with. There's plenty of music and like ambient sounds that are in the public domain. You can find people who have donated things to the public domain under what's called a Creative Commons license. So if you ever see that attached to a source on the internet, that means that you can use it as long as you attribute it to the person. So if you look for things like that, that'll also help you steer clear of any kind of copyright danger.
Mm-hmm. And you can ask us.
Excellent. We had somebody new join the conversation, and I'm going to unmute right now. It looks like Bianca has joined in.
Hi.
Bianca, hi, welcome. Where are you from, Bianca?
I'm from Grosse Pointe South.
Oh, excellent. And one of the print publication there is at the Tower?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. Well, thanks for chiming in. South, you guys print like a lot and very often.
Yeah.
you guys are out weekly, right?
Yep, we are.
And I know you do some challenging, interesting stories. Have you faced any First Amendment challenges this year? Because we have Nancy Costello here from the First Amendment Law Clinic.
Yeah, so actually we are currently working on, me and my editor-in-chief are currently working on a story about how the culture and the environment at our school has changed a lot over the past few years. And a lot of students always are talking about how the administration has kind of made everything a little more strict, and the whole environment is a lot more harsh. So that's kind of what we're focusing on right now. So our administrators are definitely, we don't have prior review. That's not like our school policy at all, but they definitely try to control in a way, sort of thing. So yeah, that's usually our struggle with them.
a strong suggestion here. It's good news that you don't have prior review and you want to stay away from prior review at all costs if you can help it. I know that Grosse Pointe South has gone through some changes in some past years. And in the last couple of years, you also lost who was a very long time and stalwart faculty advisor.
Yeah.
So there's some new faculty advisors who, are getting their feet wet and learning the ropes and so forth too. So knowing the rules, knowing the law, like you just mentioned about prior review, is really important, Bianca. And again, insisting on being able to not go or not pass any of your work past the principal and getting the go-ahead from the principal or other administrators before you publish is really important, because once you establish that, once it starts happening and it becomes a habit, then it becomes what we call, the customary practice, and it's very difficult to get away from that. So you want to avoid it as much as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Again, though, you don't want to avoid it by saying, geez, if we publish this piece, this administrator is going to insist that we see it, so therefore we're just not going to do that piece. Because then you're self-editing, right? You're self-censoring.
Yeah.
And it has the same effect. So, the best thing to do is when you write a piece that that might be controversial, make sure you cover all your bases, right? Make sure that you get all sides of it. The reporting on it is as objective as possible. So the principal or the administrator cannot censor the piece just for what we call sort of legitimate pedagogical concerns. And what that means under the law is basic stuff like bad grammar, the fact that perhaps it's not a balanced approach because you've only interviewed one side of the story and so forth, right? If you're going to do a controversial piece, you want to make sure that piece is darn near perfect before it gets published in terms of sort of satisfying all the rules of journalism, right?
Yeah.
Rules. Because a lot of times that's another way that administrators will try to shut down the work. But if you then have to go to court over it eventually, and we are happy to try to represent you in something like that, we want to make sure that you've really dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's in terms of journalism, ethics, and so forth. And then it's a much stronger court case.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of these young journalists here are going to be heading off to college within, gosh, guys, TikTok, right? It's coming up. You probably have your dorm assignments already, some of the seniors out there, and getting excited about that. And they're probably, a few of them are probably thinking about working for their college papers. It seems like college papers are more under attack today than almost any other media outlet. Why is that? What's that trend? And how, when they move into the college sphere, what should they know heading in, and what can they do to help protect their rights as they move on?
Okay, so you actually have more First Amendment rights once you become of majority age. Majority age is older than the age of 18. So as you graduate from high school and move on to college, right, you guys actually have more First Amendment protections and not less. So college newspapers have more freedom to speak out, to put things out there that are controversial, with a lot less opportunity for administrators to shut down that speech. Particularly, of course, we're talking about public schools, public colleges, less so if they're private colleges, okay? There's another group called FIRE. Caitlin, do you remember what FIRE stands for? Foundation of something or other. Anyway, we can look this up and give it to you, but FIRE does a lot of work around speech issues with colleges. It's also interesting, some of the speech issues that we're seeing shut down at colleges these days, it's like flipped over the decades, right? It used to be decades ago in the 50s and 60s, the kind of speakers that were shut down were those who were considered really marginalized back then, say people who were communists, people who were socialists. And now a lot of the speech that's being shut down or trying to be shut down on college campuses tend to be more conservative voices. Far right conservative voices. So things kind of come full circle here. And the First Amendment, of course, protects all speech from the left or the right side as well as in between. But you actually have more rights, Jamie, than you do in high school in terms of college publications.
Why does it seem like they're more under attack today than ever, though?
I think sorry, I just, from my own experience, I worked with the SPLC over the summer in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And just kind of seeing the way journalism as a whole is kind of being treated recently. Maybe more, that's what we're seeing. Professional journalists, anymore have been called, the enemy of the people, which is absolutely ridiculous, but kind of the whole profession is under attack. And so college journalists are usually more independent. They're not usually funded by the school or kind of closely watched or closely ingrained like high school journalism programs are. So they're going to be a lot more scrutinized than maybe a high school journalism staff would be. But they're also doing really, really important stories. So that's why it's really important for journalists not to get disillusioned with this. So over the summer, working with SPLC, we had a ton of college journalists who were fighting really, really hard. We were working with freedom of information requests because they were trying to break these really, really important stories about sexual harassment in the workplace, sexual harassment of students, and the university was really fighting to kind of hide those records. So it might seem like maybe the college journalists are getting more censored, but I think anymore it's just we have to keep fighting as journalists to kind of protect those rights, protect that ability to report, and fight the good fight and not kind of give up hope with these struggles.
We've also seen, I'll chime in a little bit because I'm Jeremy Steele. I'm the MIPA director for those of you who don't know me. And I also I sit on the board of the State News here at Michigan State. So the State News is unique among a lot of college newspapers because it's technically independent from the university. But some of the stories that we've seen involving controversy around college publications, a lot of that in the last year or two has been tied to the finances of those organizations. And a lot of those college newspapers that we've seen in the headlines do get some kind of funding from the university. And so in some cases, the university itself or the funding might flow through student government. In some of those cases, you've seen folks cut back on funding for those newspapers, which in today's financial climate for newspapers is particularly damaging to those organizations. So just like we have seen the business model in professional media change as many different digital media forms have risen, and there are all kinds of new digital advertising options. We've seen that happen also in the college world. And so print advertising traditionally was the source of most of the revenue for college news organizations, college newspapers. And that source of revenue has evaporated as we've seen different kinds of digital advertising options that are often much cheaper come up. So as colleges pull any kind of financial money from college media organizations, it really is having a disproportionate effect on those organizations because that's their most stable form of revenue now. Which thankfully in high school, for the most part, you're a little bit more secure from kind of the ebbs and flows of that market. Although, you do definitely have to be concerned about whether your schools and your school districts might pull any additional funds that you're not raising yourself, should they decide for whatever reason they want to.
Oh,
I think that Elizabeth Sear, if I'm not mistaken, just posted a comment to say that some of this kind of budget cutting is happening at the high school level too. It's the death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing. And I think that that is a concern at the high school level also.
Yeah, I mean, schools that maintain their program are lucky to have them. Elizabeth, yeah. Speaking of Elizabeth, I've had you muted. I just opened you up there. You have anything to add? What?
I've enjoyed all of it. I was particularly interested in the discussion about podcasting and sound and that sort of thing because I see a lot of programs moving to digital production from. Like it used to be just enhancing the print, but because of what we're talking about right now, I'm seeing maybe just a personal upsurge of interest, but also like we need to learn these technologies so that we can produce in this realm. So we've been really fortunate to have the law clinics at our school a few times. And so I feel like our journos are pretty aware of what those laws are and what their freedoms are in a print environment, but what it comes to been making a podcast and what's okay. Like, for example, I was going over giving like an editing grade to some students today, and they had some static sound in their, they're talking about like sound therapy for anxiety. And I was like, yeah, where'd you get that? And they said, oh, well, we just taped it off of YouTube. Like, we ran the YouTube video and taped it. It was instant in their eyes, but I was like, okay, so that's like you stole the picture without credit. That's why I was asking about that. I said, so you have to go and look at what did the artist say about putting that sound up and who can use it. And I feel like I'm not quite as skilled. I know to ask the questions, but I don't know what the answers are.
Right.
But when you said
they're the same answers, Elizabeth, as with photos. So I mean, if you're confident in the rules for photos, sound and video is exactly the same.
Okay.
Yeah, and
We
Facebook
went
is
to the SoundCloud and it didn't really say, so I was like, yeah, I think you need to do something else, because if we don't have enough information, we probably shouldn't do it.
Facebook is getting more strict. You used to be able to like play a video. You could go live on Facebook and you could have your music playing in the background and talk to your friends or do whatever. There's a group that I belong to, and this one gentleman comes on and talks about products in the evening, and he's fun to listen to, and he's a whimsical guy, and he's always got his gangster rap going behind him, and he's funny. Well, Facebook has put the kibosh on that for sure. And so now before you couldn't save the video, or if you saved it, it would delete it because of the copyrighted material. But now, even while it's live, the algorithm picks it up and it cuts off the live video. It's like you have copyrighted music playing. You have to end that stream. So Facebook is got those algorithms, and they're cutting you off. It's pretty interesting. So
we could only wish they could do as well with the Russian influences. Right?
And not only are they cutting off your live feed, but they also can shut down your account and your ability to do future live feeds. We've had that happen in the School of Journalism with our Facebook, where our tech people were just running a test and they were playing music in the background so they could hear sound go through as they were running the test, and Facebook shut it down and locked us out from using Facebook Live until we could jump back through their hoops to clear that up. So yeah, the big companies are on top of it, because big companies have a lot of money and they don't want to be sued by the copyright holders.
Yeah, those algorithms are getting smarter and smarter. So what about you guys, all the students? Anything else, not First Amendment? Any issues or anything going on? You're like, gosh, how does another staff deal with this? Does anybody have anything to go, look at that, she's unmuting. Oh man, here we go. They are. The girls got something. Samantha and Abby, right? What's up?
Yes, we've been waiting. Yeah, you can go ahead. Okay. Well, we've noticed ever since the beginning of the school year, our staff has really struggled with meeting deadline. And like that was like for print deadline and then for web story deadline, especially web story deadline. I feel like people felt like it wasn't that big of a deal. And so they kept pulling it off, and they're like, oh, like I'll just get it done next week. But then the story wasn't timely anymore. And so we had to drop a lot of stories, and then they'd get mad. But we're like, but it's not timely. Like we can't post about it anymore unless you change the angle. And it's been like a really big problem, especially with our past deadline that we just had for our print issue. Like we had to stay after school so late because people just didn't have their stuff done, and us editors needed to get it done for them just so we could make deadline. And so yeah, I don't know, like if you guys have suggestions on how we can motivate our staff to get them to make deadline.
Yeah, there's a couple of you guys have muted yourself, so if you want to jump back in. Yeah, Ellie, there you go. What do you got?
I know we struggle with it, but like there's always going to be the students that just don't want to get their work done, and I don't think there's a lot you can do to motivate them. But I know like positive reinforcement really helps with some students, like acknowledging when a student does a good job in front of the entire class, and then it makes other students want to be recognized as well. So then they start wanting to do the same great job that we were recognizing other people for.
Okay, I like the idea. Yeah. Thanks.
Like we would like, when for print editor at least, like she did a really good job at editing her stories on time. And so in front of the class I was like, and like I wanted to thank Lydia for doing a really great job. She did this, this, and this, and like things like that, like positive reinforcement. Because I think we've tried the negative of like being like, okay, well now you have a grade deduction, or like getting mad at them. And I think some people just don't care, but they like,
Yeah.
I think some students like the attention being put onto them of like as a positive instead of a negative. So I know that always sometimes helps.
Thanks for the idea. I like that. Yeah.
So yeah, Bianca, you said you're from South, right? And so South has some serious deadlines because you publish weekly. How do you guys manage? I think you're muted, Bianca, if you're still there. I don't know. Bianca, you still with us?
Yeah. Hi.
Okay. Hey.
So we actually do the grade reduction thing. So we have a system with demerits. So our grades are by points per story or per whatever content you're doing. So we have one demerit is 2 points grade deducted. So that's how we do it. And a lot of people we do have a really big staff. So I think like the environment that we're in, I think a lot of people are kind of competitive. So the demerits help us a lot. That's how we usually do it. But I don't know if you've tried that or not.
I don't know if necessarily that our advisor wants to do that. But yeah, I don't know. We can bring it up to her. Yeah. She basically, like, the way that she made her grading scale, she was like, I feel like people can't get a good grade in the class if they don't make the stuff on time, because they just like can't complete everything done in order to get our full points. But she's been realizing, and we've talked about this, how students still are getting A's even though like they're not meeting deadline. Like they can still get things done even though like they're not meeting deadline. So I don't know, it's a work in progress for sure.
Can I add something in?
Yeah.
So I think it's a balance, because this is my 20th year doing it, and I will drive to Holt and give you half my salary if you figure this out, because it's really hard. But I think it's a balance, because once students in a class like this start getting a bad grade, then they don't work. So you don't want that to happen. They just give up and they don't contribute. But and I understand your teacher's point of view about like being in an elective, and if you get a bad grade, no one's coming back. So then you don't have a staff either. One thing that we did this year on both yearbook and newspaper is I did a thing where I said all labs are going to be on Wednesday and they're going to be till 5:30. So if you have a practice of a sport, you have whatever it is, you can come and go whenever you want. And I find that, and it's a grade, and that grade sticks. If you don't come to labs, and you can do it any Wednesday, you have a certain number of hours for the month, and you can come and go. But what happens is a lot of kids come, and the kids who aren't doing their work don't know how to do their work. So they're around other kids who actually know what they're doing. And maybe it's like a crossover staff, like a yearbook and a newspaper kid, and they're working together, and they're getting more direct help from me. So like I'm helping them problem solve, and we're eating pizza and, you know, doing all that positive reinforcement that another student was talking about. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better than it was. I'll say that.
Can I offer something? I'm not in your guys' position, but as a former newspaper reporter, sometimes I think you're onto something when you say, you know, you offer a carrot rather than shaking a stick at somebody, rather than trying to lower the grade. And one of the things I thought reporters really responded to is story placement. So, you know, if you were a reporter who consistently got things done on time, and you consistently, you know, had objective points of view, you interviewed everybody, the grammar was good, the spelling was good, so your copy editor didn't have to spend hours going over your copy, frequently you got better story placement. So even if you weren't on the front page, because I get it, right? We place our best stories, our most controversial, our most sexy stories on the front page. But maybe we get on the front local page, right? And that was kind of a feather in the cap of the reporter. And they really took pride in that. And so, you know, maybe you reward those reporters that do really get things done on time consistently by better story placement. And they want to kind of keep that up. I don't know.
Yeah, we've also talked about something like that too.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
I like that, yeah.
Cool. Anything else? Anybody else have challenges or any successes they want to share and talk about? Awesome. Elizabeth, what about you? Anything else to touch base on? Oh, I know I got something, but what do you got?
I was just going to say, last week I sent a question into the McClellan site, so I'm eager to get my response.
Okay.
Like, do you get an email back, or how does that work? We wrote a question on the site.
Caitlin, are you there?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I haven't seen one come in to me, but I will double check.
Okay.
This is still a soft launch, so we're still kind of working all the bugs out of the website.
Okay.
But I will see if I can find it.
It was a question about a student doing a review about a Bohemian Rhapsody and getting pictures, because it's a review, but like, does the student actually have to get permission from like a movie company if they go to that website, because they're never writing back?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a review of that specific thing. And then how do you do that caption? I think that's the question.
Were you doing a review of the movie, the new movie coming out?
Yeah.
And were you taking still shots from that movie?
That the movie, the movie site said, here's our gallery.
You should be okay. You wouldn't be okay if you're necessarily taking like old biopics of Freddie Mercury from, the 1980s, right?
Right.
Because that's not who's in the movie.
Right.
But you should be okay if you're actually taking still shots from the movie as promo pictures for the movie, because they actually want you to do that kind of a thing. And if you're giving a review of the movie, then you're actually reviewing exactly like perhaps a scene that's in the movie, or this actor who plays this character, you should be okay with that. But you can't then like go and pull down old pictures of Queen and Freddie Mercury and use those.
Right. Okay.
That would not be okay.
How do you caption something like that? And not caption, but your photo credit?
Caitlin,
what is language? Because it's not, sometimes there's a photographer listed, sometimes there's not.
Mm-hmm. I mean, definitely list a photographer if they're listed. If it's like a screenshot or something, I would at the very least put the copyright information, like copyright Paramount 2018 or whatever it is.
List the studio.
Mm-hmm.
The studio.
I mean, if you look kind of in the industry, when we're talking about screenshots from a film as opposed to a photograph that somebody's taking, most of the time you see those credited to the studio.
Because the studio owns both the copyright of the film, but sometimes they're doing the screenshots themselves. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So Nancy, thank you so much. Caitlin, thank you so much for taking the time and being here, and all the students. Thank you, Jeremy, for setting this up. We had one person on a phone call in, so whoever that was, I can't tell who that was, and I'm not sure how to bring you into the conversation besides that you're listening, but thank you for being there on the phone. We didn't not know you were there, to use too many negatives. So thanks for being there. And all the students, right, as we're heading into contest time, you got to think about your portfolios. So think about you guys are here working hard, and you're here after school. I appreciate you. And I can guarantee that you guys are some of the all-stars. So make sure we can recognize you by putting together a portfolio. If you're not sure what that is, go to the MIPA website. Jeremy, where will they just be able to find on the website?
Hopefully, yeah. So all of the contest information you can find under the contest central menu item up at the top of the page. And from there, it's divided up into different things. So you've got your Spartan critiques. There's the individual category contest. So that's things like best story, best photograph, etc., best design. And then there's the special honors area. And that's where you're going to find information for those of you who are graduating seniors on how you can submit a portfolio to be considered for the MIPA student journalist staff.
Yeah, because it's winter break is a nice time. The Christmas break is a nice time to kind of get your thoughts together and work on that portfolio. So talk to your advisors. You can email me because I've helped kids with them before too. So if your advisor's like, I got no idea where to start, there you go. Jamie.
I just dumped all of it in their group me. They've been getting tons and tons of discussions from me about it. So
Perfect. Well, there you go. So you guys are already in the loop. So
consider too, for the students, consider nominating your advisor for MIPA's Golden Pen Award. It's basically our Teacher of the Year award. If they haven't been recognized with that in the past, then think about putting together a portfolio to nominate them for this next year.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. That's all I had. Nancy, anything to wrap it up, or Caitlin, anything to wrap it up?
Just remember that the McClellanLib.com is out there. And if you guys have questions, you can both look at the site. We're really proud of it. And I think it's a lot of the questions we've talked about here, in fact, are on the site itself. We're also posting current events and just news of what's going on with student journalists and student press issues across the country. And we'll be sending out press releases at the end of January, beginning of February, and we hope that you guys tap into that and use it.
All right. So Hannah, Bianca, Madeline, Ellie, Samantha, Abby, thank you guys. You guys are all stars. Thanks for being here.
You guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.